The morning I walked into my own bakery as a customer, I almost laughed. Almost. There was my name on the chalkboard menu, the one I'd designed, the one I'd painted in my own handwriting the summer before everything fell apart, used as decoration for a business that no longer had my name on the paperwork. My ex husband was shaking hands behind the counter, laughing with a vendor, wearing the apron I'd sewn patches onto. And I just ordered a coffee, sat down at a window table, and waited because I wasn't there to make a scene. I was there because the building those walls were standing in, the lights, the walk in refrigerator, the commercial mixer that cost more than my first car, belonged to me. Every last bit of it. And he was about to find that out in front of every single person he'd invited to his grand opening. But let me back up, way back, because this story doesn't start with a betrayal. It starts with a dream and a woman who believed that sharing it meant something. My name is Cassie. I'm 31 years old and I live in Greenville, South Carolina. And I want to tell you about the 6 years I spent building something and the 2 years I spent taking it back. I grew up about 40 minutes outside of Greenville in a small town where the big Friday night event was the high school football game and the Dairy Queen closed at 9. My mama ran a daycare out of our house, and my dad drove trucks long haul, which meant he was home about 8 days a month. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. We were the kind of family that made it work month to month and didn't ask for much because asking felt like weakness. What I did have was a kitchen. My grandmother, Mima Loretta, lived 3 houses down. Every Saturday morning, before anybody else was awake, I'd walk over in my pajamas, and she'd already have flour on the counter and butter softening on the windowsill. She didn't teach me recipes so much as she taught me patience. How to let dough rise without poking it. How to know by the smell when something was ready. How to put enough love into something that people could taste the difference, even if they couldn't name it. By the time I was in high school, I was baking for the church fundraiser, for neighbors, for anyone who asked. By 20, I had a small catering side business out of Mima Loretta's kitchen. By 22, I had a business plan written out in a spiral notebook that I kept under my mattress like it was something sacred. I wanted a bakery, a real one, with a storefront and a chalkboard menu and mismatched chairs and the smell of brown butter that hit you the second you opened the door. I wanted to name it Loretta's. I'd already sketched the logo. And then I met Marcus. Marcus came into my life the way a lot of things do when you're 22 and hopeful, fast, and promising. He was 30, charming in that easy, southern way, always had a story, always had a plan. He'd tried a few business ventures that hadn't quite worked out, he said. But he was smart, he said, and he just needed the right opportunity and the right partner. He said that last part looking directly at me. We dated for 14 months. He was attentive in the beginning, the kind of attentive that feels like being chosen. He'd ask about my baking, taste everything I made, tell me I had a gift. He said things like, "You need someone in your corner who knows how to handle the business side because creative people, they get taken advantage of, Cass. You need protection." I believed him. I was 23, I had a gift and a dream in a spiral notebook, and I thought I'd found the person who would help me protect it. We got married in May. Small ceremony, backyard. Meemaw Loretta in a lavender dress holding a handkerchief she never actually used because she was tougher than that. My mama cried. Marcus's family came up from Colombia. It was a beautiful day. I have exactly one photo from it on my phone now, and I keep it not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of how good something can look from the outside. The first year of our marriage, Marcus and I were partners. Or at least I thought we were. I kept baking, kept building my client list, kept saving. Marcus handled the business side, which meant he opened a joint bank account, moved my savings into it, and started making decisions I wasn't always looped into but was always reassured about. "Don't worry about it, babe. That's what I'm here for." I should have asked more questions. I know that now. But when you grow up in a house where asking felt like weakness, you don't always unlearn it fast enough. By the time I was 25, we had enough to start moving on the bakery dream. Marcus found a commercial space on a block in downtown Greenville that was starting to pick up, near a coffee shop and a yoga studio, the kind of foot traffic that works for a bakery. He handled the lease negotiations. He incorporated the business. He set up the vendor accounts. My name was on the business, technically. But Marcus was listed as managing partner. He'd explained that away with something about liability protection and tax structure, using just enough terminology to make me nod along. I didn't have a lawyer look at anything. I trusted my husband. I did everything else. I designed the space. I sourced the equipment. I hired the staff. I wrote every recipe. I trained every employee. I built relationships with every supplier. I showed up at 4:30 in the morning for our soft opening, and I didn't leave until 9 at night. I painted the chalkboard menu myself in my own handwriting with a chalk marker I'd practiced with for a week to get the lettering right. I named it Loretta's. Meemaw Loretta came to the soft opening in her lavender dress. She looked around the space and she said, "Baby, you built something." And then she squeezed my hand with both of hers and didn't let go for a long time. For the first 8 months, the bakery was ours. It was everything I'd imagined. Lines out the door on Saturday mornings, a wholesale account with a hotel 2 blocks over, a write-up in the local food blog that brought in a whole new wave of regulars, staff who actually cared, because I cared, because the whole thing felt like something built with love, rather than just launched for profit. Marcus ran the business side. I was fine with that, mostly. He handled payroll, invoices, vendor payments. He went to the networking events, shook hands, talked numbers, and I baked. That was the deal. Or so I understood it. What I didn't understand was what was happening on paper. It started with small things I couldn't quite name. Marcus started making hiring decisions without telling me. He replaced one of my original staff members with a woman I didn't know, said she was better qualified, moved on. He started having supplier meetings I wasn't included in. When I asked, he'd say I had enough on my plate, said he was protecting my energy so I could focus on the creative side. He used the word protecting a lot. He also started taking a salary from the business, a substantial one, which I didn't know about until I accidentally opened an email that wasn't meant for me, sitting on his laptop one night while he was in the shower. It wasn't snooping. The laptop was open, the email was on the screen. It was a message from our accountant, and it had numbers in it that made my stomach drop. Marcus was pulling $4,000 a month from Loretta's as a management fee. The business account he controlled had an outgoing wire I didn't recognize to an LLC I'd never heard of. And at the bottom of the email, the accountant had CC'd a name I didn't know, listed as co-owner. I sat there in our kitchen for a long time, barefoot on the tile, his laptop warm on the counter, the shower still running. I didn't say anything that night. I'm not proud of that, but I want to be honest. I was scared, not of Marcus physically, but of what asking would confirm. Because once I asked and got the answer, I couldn't unknow it. And unknowing felt safer than the alternative. I gave myself 2 weeks. 2 weeks to pay attention differently, to look at things I'd been told not to worry about, to start asking quiet questions of people who might know answers. What I found in those 2 weeks was worse than I'd imagined. The LLC listed as co-owner of Loretta's belonged to Marcus's college friend, Devin. Devin, who'd never set foot in my bakery. Devin, who lived in Atlanta and had no connection to the business I knew of. Marcus had quietly sold him a 30% stake in Loretta's using my equity as the transaction. Not his equity, mine. The management fee Marcus was pulling monthly wasn't disclosed in any document I'd signed, because I hadn't signed it. It had been added to the business structure after the fact. The lease on the commercial space was in Marcus's name only, not mine, not the business's. I had been operating as the creative engine and daily labor of a business that was being systematically removed from my control, one paperwork move at a time, by someone who slept in my bed and used the word protecting like it was a gift he was giving me. I sat with this for 3 days. Then I called my cousin Renata, who is an attorney in Charlotte, and I told her everything. Renata was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Cassie, don't move a single dollar. Don't sign anything. Don't confront him yet. Call me back tomorrow and I'll have names." I called her back the next morning. She had names. Here's what I want you to understand about the next 18 months, because they weren't dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no thrown plates, no single moment of revelation where I flipped a table and walked out. What happened was slower than that and quieter and in a lot of ways harder. I went to work every day. I baked. I smiled. I trained my staff. I showed up at 4:30 in the morning and I left when the last tray was clean. And simultaneously in parallel, in the hours between closing time and when Marcus expected me home, I was building a case. Renata connected me with a business litigation attorney named Patricia Okafor, who had a small office on the north side of Greenville and wore blazes in colors that made you feel like things were going to be okay. Patricia reviewed everything. Every document I'd originally signed, every email I'd quietly photographed on Marcus's laptop before I'd closed it that night, every vendor contract, every wholesale agreement, every scrap of paperwork I'd ever touched. And here's what Patricia found. I had a case. Not a simple one, but a real one. Because here's the thing Marcus didn't account for in his careful rearranging of paperwork and his strategic use of my compliance. He didn't account for the fact that I had documentation of everything I'd built. Every recipe was in my handwriting, timestamped in emails I'd sent to suppliers. My original business plan, in my spiral notebook with dates I could corroborate. Photographs I'd taken of the build out I'd manage. Staff who were willing to testify about who showed up every morning and who ran that kitchen. Marcus thought managing the paperwork meant owning the business. He forgot that ownership is also proven by labor, by presence, by the building of something from nothing. Patricia called what Marcus had done fraudulent misrepresentation and conversion of marital assets. The court would call it that too, eventually. But we weren't in court yet. We were in the part where you gather everything quietly and you wait. Meemaw Loretta passed away that October, peacefully, in her home in the recliner she'd had for 20 years, with a quilt across her lap and the television on low. She was 81. She'd had a good run, and she knew it. She wasn't scared. My mama told me she was ready. She left me her house, small place, paid off, on that same street 3 houses down from where I'd grown up. And she left me a letter, handwritten on her good stationery, that said, "Cassie girl, you always knew how to build something beautiful. Don't let anyone take the credit. Love, me, Ma." I don't know if she knew. I don't know if she'd pieced it together from the things I hadn't said on my phone calls to her. But I held that letter in Patricia Okafor's office and I couldn't speak for a full minute. Then I looked at Patricia and I said, "I'm ready, let's move." We filed in November. Marcus was served on a Tuesday. I wasn't home when it happened. I was at the bakery making the brown butter financiers we sold out of every single week, and my phone buzzed with a text from Renata that just said, "Done." I put my phone in my apron pocket and kept baking. The divorce proceedings took 7 months. Marcus hired an attorney who tried to argue that his management role justified the financial arrangements he'd made. Patricia dismantled that argument methodically and without raising her voice once. She put my spiral notebook into evidence. She put my emails to suppliers into evidence. She had 3 of my staff members make statements. She walked the court through the timeline of every decision I had made, every morning I had shown up, every relationship I had built that made Loretta's what it was. The co-ownership stake Marcus had sold to Devin was ruled fraudulent, since he had no authority to sell my equity without my knowledge or consent. It was unwound. Devin, to his credit, didn't fight it. I think Marcus hadn't been entirely honest with him about the arrangement either. The management fee Marcus had been drawing was ruled a misappropriation of marital assets and credited against his settlement. And the lease. The lease on the commercial space, the one in Marcus's name only, became an asset subject to division in the divorce. Here is where it got interesting. Marcus wanted to keep the bakery. He believed, I think genuinely, that he could run it, that the business was separable from the person who built it, that you could just step into the role and have it continue. He made an offer to buy out my interest. It was insulting. Patricia told me not to respond emotionally. I told her I wasn't emotional. I was insulted and there was a difference. We counter-offered. Marcus rejected it. We went back to court. The judge ruled that since I was the primary creative and operational contributor to the business, and since Marcus's financial management had been found to contain fraudulent elements, the fair resolution was that I retained controlling interest in Loretta's, with a cash settlement to Marcus, representing his legitimate marital contribution to startup costs. That cash settlement, I want to be clear, was not small. I had to work for it, but I paid it because what I got in return was the business, the name, the recipes, the staff relationships, the wholesale contracts, and the lease assignment. The lease assignment took an extra 6 weeks because the building's property management company had to approve the transfer. During those 6 weeks, Marcus stayed on the lease, and I was technically operating in a space he still had legal claim to. Those were a long 6 weeks. But the assignment went through on a Thursday morning in September. Patricia called me while I was driving to work and said, "It's yours. The lease is in your name. The building manager signed." I pulled over on the side of Route 14 and sat there for about 5 minutes. Then I went to work and made brown butter financiers. Marcus wasn't done, though. He'd already moved on. He had a new plan. He'd started telling people in our shared social circle, and apparently some of the local business community, that the divorce was mutual, that Loretta's had been his concept from the start, that I'd been a difficult partner who couldn't handle the business side. He started his own bakery. He called it the Golden Crumb. He scheduled his grand opening for a Saturday in October. 8 months after the divorce was finalized, he invited vendors, local press, neighbors, everyone. He promoted it on social media. He used a similar aesthetic to Loretta's: mismatched chairs, chalkboard menu, that same warm vibe. He hired a staff. He had pastries in the case. What he did not have was a location he'd properly secured. See, Marcus had been operating his new bakery out of a commercial kitchen space that he'd been leasing month to month from a property owner who, as it turned out, had been looking to sell the building for over a year. And that building, the one housing the Golden Crumb, had just gone up for auction. I found out about the auction through a real estate contact I'd made during the Loretta's lease renegotiation. She sent me a listing with a note. "Isn't this where your ex set up shop?" I called Patricia Okafor. Patricia said, "Cassie, that would be a sound investment." I called Renata. Renata said, "Do it." I called my mother. My mother said, "Lord have mercy, baby. You are your Meemaw's child." I used the cash from the sale of Meemaw Loretta's house. She'd left it to me free and clear. It was modest, but it was enough, with the financial footing I'd rebuilt since the divorce, to be a competitive bid on a commercial property in a neighborhood that was appreciating steadily. I bid on the building. I won. The closing was 2 weeks before Marcus's grand opening. I did not contact Marcus. I did not post about it. I did not tell anyone in our shared circles. I instructed my attorney to send the standard tenant notification letter to the occupants of the building, which legally I was required to do, announcing the change of ownership and the terms of their existing month-to-month lease. It was a form letter, neutral, legal, professional. Marcus received it 4 days before his grand opening. Patricia told me later that his attorney called her the next morning. That call lasted 11 minutes. There was nothing legally for Marcus to do. He was a month-to-month tenant. The sale was clean. The building was mine. His lease was valid through the end of the month, and I had no plans to disrupt his opening day. What happened after that was a different conversation. But I wasn't there to disrupt him. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't there for revenge. What I was there for was to see, with my own eyes, what it looked like when something you built got turned into someone else's ambition. I wanted to feel it, sit with it, and then let it go. So on a Saturday morning in October, I drove to the building I now owned, walked through the door of the Golden Crumb, ordered a coffee and a croissant at the counter, and sat down at a window table. Marcus didn't see me come in. He was working the room, shaking hands, laughing with vendors. He was wearing an apron, not one I'd sewn patches on, a new one. That was a relief. The space was nice. He'd done a decent job with the decor. The pastries in the case looked competent. Not exceptional, but competent. The chalkboard menu was a different handwriting than mine. I sat there for about 45 minutes. I drank my coffee. I ate my croissant. I watched people come in and mill around and congratulate him, and I felt something complicated, something that wasn't triumph, exactly. More like clarity. At some point, his eyes swept the room and landed on me. He went very still. I raised my coffee cup slightly, just a small acknowledgement. Then I looked back out the window. He came over. I knew he would. He sat down across from me without being invited, which was very Marcus, and he said in a voice pitched low so the room couldn't hear, "What are you doing here? I said, having coffee. This is a nice space. He looked at me for a long moment. He knew, of course he knew, he'd received the letter. He'd had his attorney make the call. But knowing and being confronted with it across a table were two different things. How long are you going to keep doing this, Cassie? He said. I looked at him. At this man I had trusted with my dream. At the face that had said protecting and meant something else entirely. I'm not doing anything to you, Marcus, I said. I bought a building. That's a legal transaction between me and a seller. You're a tenant. If you want to continue being a tenant, you can call my property manager. He stared at me. I need this location. He said, I know. I said, so what do you want? He asked. And here's the thing. Here's the part I want you to really hear. Because this is the part I'd been thinking about since the moment I'd opened that bid submission. I said, I want a fair lease. Market rate. Same terms you'd get from any landlord. Month-to-month converts to a 12-month agreement, standard commercial terms, reviewed annually. He blinked. That's it? That's it, I said. I'm a landlord, Marcus, not a villain. I stood up. I picked up my coffee cup. I said, congratulations on the opening. And I walked out. That was 14 months ago. Marcus signed a 12-month lease. He's been a fine tenant, pays on time, no issues. We communicate through the property management company, and we have not spoken directly since that Saturday morning. Loretta's is thriving. We expanded our wholesale program. We added a second counter service window on Saturday mornings because the line was getting unwieldy. I hired a general manager, so I'm not running every operational detail myself, which means I actually get to bake again. The way I used to at Meemaw Loretta's house, with flour on the counter and enough quiet to hear myself think. I renovated Meemaw Loretta's old house. I don't live there. I'm renting it to a young woman named Simone, who is finishing her nursing degree and needed something affordable and steady. The rent is below market because that's what I can afford to do, and it's what I want to do. Meemaw Loretta would have had Simone over for coffee and taught her something about pie crust by now. I like to think she'd approve. I also started meeting with a financial advisor. Not because I needed to be told I was doing well, but because I needed to build the kind of knowledge base that means no one can ever again explain something to me using just enough terminology to make me nod along. I read contracts now, every line. I ask questions even when it makes me feel slow or unsophisticated, because I've learned that the questions I don't ask are the ones that cost me everything. My mama told me last Easter, sitting at her kitchen table with coffee and a slice of the brown butter cake I'd brought, that she was proud of me. She said it the way she says things she means, quietly, without ceremony, looking at the table. I said, I learned it from Meemaw Loretta. She said, you learned it from yourself, baby. Loretta just showed you where to look. I'm telling you this story because I think a lot of us give our labor to people and call it love. We pour the work, the knowledge, the early mornings, the handmade things, the creative energy into shared spaces, and we assume that the sharing makes it fair. We assume that trust is the same as protection. We assume that someone who says, I've got the business side, means they're carrying something with us rather than carrying it away. Some of the most important things I own right now, Loretta's, the commercial building, the financial knowledge I've built over the past 2 years, none of them were given to me. They were taken from me first, and then I went and got them back, one legal filing and one real estate bid at a time. My grandmother spent 30 years building recipes in a kitchen that cost her nothing. She didn't have a business plan. She didn't have a license or a storefront or a chalkboard menu. She had patience, and she had hands, and she had the belief that if you put enough care into something, people could taste it. She was right about that. I lost the business for a while. I lost the person I thought I was building with. I lost months of sleep and more money than I want to add up. And I built it back, larger this time, with my name on the paperwork, with a lawyer I trust and a financial advisor who speaks to me like I'm capable of understanding, because I am. If you are somewhere in the middle of losing something you built, I want to say this plainly. The document doesn't own the thing. The labor owns the thing. The knowledge owns the thing. What you know how to do cannot be transferred without your consent, no matter whose name is on the lease. Marcus can run a bakery, but he cannot be the person who built Loretta's. because that person is standing in her kitchen at 4:30 in the morning in Greenville, South Carolina, with flour on her hands and a spiral notebook she still has, and she knows exactly what she's building and exactly who it belongs to. It belongs to her. It belongs to me. Thank you for listening. If this story hits something real for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're building something, even slowly, even quietly, keep building. I'll see you in the next one.